Hi, welcome to the Hurricane Utah Adult Religion class, sponsored by the Hurricane Utah North Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Mike Parker, and since 2008, it's been my privilege to be the instructor for this class. The Hurricane Utah Adult Religion class meets on Thursday evenings between September and May to discuss the scriptures, teachings, and history of the restored Church of Jesus Christ. If you live in or are visiting the Hurricane St. George area, I'd love to have you join us. Time and location are available on the class website. There's a link to that in the show notes just below this video. Also on the class website, you can download my notes, which includes footnotes documenting my sources, this PowerPoint presentation, and handouts that I distribute in class. Please note that this YouTube channel and the class website are not official sites of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Hurricane Utah North Stake, or any other church unit or department. I alone am responsible for the content on these sites. What you're about to see is a recording of my notes for one of the lessons. If you enjoy this video, please click the like button and share it with a friend. And please feel free to subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new content is posted to this channel. My friends, the gospel of Jesus Christ is true. Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, and the authority and keys that he held are now vested in the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And most importantly, Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. I hope you enjoy this lesson. This lesson covers the events recorded in the books of 1 Kings and 2 Kings. I prepared two handouts for this lesson. The first has illustrations and diagrams of Solomon's temple showing the size of the interior and the instruments in the courtyard, the holy place, and the inner sanctuary, or Holy of Holies. The second has a genealogical list of the rulers of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. This is a printout of what's on slide 4 of this presentation. I've left a link in the show notes to download these as PDFs. You can also go to www.huarc.org to download the handouts, these notes, and this slideshow. This lesson covers not only a lot of reading material, but it also covers a longer period of history than any other lesson this year. This is the earliest that we can begin to reliably date the events recorded in the Old Testament. 1 Kings begins with the death of David and the anointing of his son Solomon as king of united Israel, circa 970 BC. 2 Kings ends almost 400 years later with the Babylonian captivity of the people of Judah during the reign of King Zedekiah, circa 587 BC. The book of 2 Chronicles covers the same period as 1st and 2nd Kings. While the books of Samuel and Kings present a detailed political history, 1st and 2nd Chronicles focus on moral and religious truths. The Chronicles also give more attention to genealogies and include some details not found in the other books. The authors of Chronicles also put a more positive spin on events, overlooking David's sin with Bathsheba and the problems resulting from Solomon's wealth and his foreign wives. Many of the Old Testament prophets lived during the period covered in 1st and 2nd Kings, including Micah, Amos, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. The Old Testament historical books indicate that there were other records of the events and prophecies in Israel, including the book of Nathan the prophet, the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and the visions of Iddo the seer. The Book of Mormon indicates that during this time there were also recorded prophecies made by Zenock, Nehem, and Zenos that are not found in the Bible. As the titles of the two books imply, 1 Kings and 2 Kings contain long and complex histories of the succession of kings of Israel and Judah. Some of these kings were righteous and led the people to the worship of Jehovah. Others permitted or even encouraged the worship of Canaanite gods. First and Second Kings judged the loyalty of the entire people based on the behavior of the king. These two books are considered part of the Deuteronomistic history, which opposed worship outside of the Jerusalem temple and the recognition of any god but Jehovah. During the time of First and Second Kings, the major regional power in the ancient Near East was the kingdom of Assyria, with its capital at Nineveh. The Assyrian Empire's rise to power began around 930 BC. It reached its zenith as a regional power 200 years later, around 730 BC. The Assyrians conquered most of the ancient Near East, including the northern kingdom of Israel, something I'll discuss later in this lesson. Many of the prophets I'm going to discuss in the coming weeks wrote about the Assyrian threat. The Assyrian Empire ended when they were conquered and absorbed by the Neo-Babylonian Empire in 612 BC. For a brief period, the newly reunified kingdom of Egypt asserted dominance over the Levant. The Babylonians repelled the Egyptians and conquered the southern kingdom of Judah. They sent most of the people of Judah into captivity, ending their existence as an independent state. Second Kings ends with Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and most of his people in exile in Babylon, and the few people left in Judah fleeing to Egypt. 1 Kings chapters 1 and 2 describe the last days of King David and his appointment of Solomon, his son by Bathsheba, as his successor. Before dying, David gave his final words of counsel to Solomon, encouraging him to be strong, to obey the Lord, and to deal decisively with Israel's remaining enemies. Despite his personal flaws, David's reign is considered Israel's golden age. He united Israel into a single nation and put an end to infighting between the tribes. He also strengthened Israel's devotion to Jehovah as their only God. Early in his reign, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream and offered to grant him his greatest wish. Solomon wished for an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. The Lord was impressed by this humble request, and so gave him not only wisdom, but also riches and honor. Solomon first used his God-given wisdom to decide between two mothers, who both claimed that the same infant was their own son. Solomon famously decreed that the child should be cut in half, and that each woman should receive one portion. Based on the reactions of the two women to his decree, he was able to determine which was the true mother. Solomon built upon the peace and prosperity his father had brought to Israel. In the process, he became not only wealthy and powerful, but also famous among other kings in the region. He was credited with composing 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs, and of having extensive knowledge of all the plants and animals in the region. People came from all nations to hear his wisdom. The peace that Israel experienced during Solomon's reign fulfilled the Lord's promise to David that Israel would enjoy rest from all her enemies. Solomon declared that he would complete the temple that his father David had planned to build. The temple was built at the top of Mount Moriah, the hill adjacent to the city of David on the north. It took 7.5 years to complete the temple structure, and an additional 13 years to finish the surrounding court and Solomon's adjoining palace. The temple was designed with the same layout as the tabernacle, but it was double the tabernacle's dimensions and constructed with much greater opulence. There were more instruments inside the sanctuary, including 10 lampstands and 10 tables for the bread of presence. 2 golden cherubim, each 15 feet or 4.6 meters tall, stood on either side of the Ark of the Covenant. The walls, ceiling, and floor of the holy place and the Holy of Holies were made from the wood of cedar and cypress trees, overlaid with gold. Outside in the courtyard was a larger altar for burnt offerings, 30 feet or 9.1 meters along each side and 15 feet or 4.6 meters tall. It was designed to accommodate the sacrificial needs of all the people of Israel. There was also an enormous cast metal laver called the Sea, where the priests could ritually purify themselves by total immersion. It was 15 feet or 4.6 meters in diameter and held 12,000 gallons or 45,425 liters of water. It stood on the backs of the replicas of 12 oxen that faced outward. There were also 10 smaller lavers on wheels for washing the instruments used in the sacrifices. Once the temple was completed, the priests brought the Ark of the Covenant and placed it in the Holy of Holies, after which the cloud of the Lord's presence filled the temple. Solomon offered the dedicatory prayer, which includes themes of thanksgiving and praise, a supplication that the Lord would accept the temple as his house, and pleas for forgiveness, mercy, and justice. The dedicatory prayer of the Kirtland Temple, revealed to Joseph Smith, is similar to Solomon's prayer in its structure and themes. After the temple was dedicated, the Lord visited Solomon a second time and accepted the temple as his house. He promised that if Solomon were righteous, he would, quote, establish the throne of the kingdom upon Israel forever, unquote. But if Solomon turned from worshiping the Lord, he would cut Israel off and destroy the temple. Solomon was, at first, greatly blessed, but he succumbed to the temptations of pride and power and married foreign women who turned his heart after idols. The Lord told Solomon, quote, since you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you. Yet for the sake of David, your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. Unquote. The Lord raised up external and internal threats instead of blessing Solomon's remaining days with peace. Solomon died about 931 BC after a 40-year reign, leaving the kingdom to his son, Rehoboam. The demise of Israel as a unified nation had begun even before Solomon's death. Through the prophet Ahijah, the Lord promised Jeroboam, a member of the tribe of Joseph, that he would tear the northern 10 tribes from Solomon and give them to Jeroboam. Solomon's policies of taxation and conscripted labor were also deeply unpopular among the people of Israel. The northern tribes also didn't feel that Solomon was one of them. David had left a powerful empire to his son, but during Solomon's later years, it began to fall apart. As the loyalty of the northern tribes waned, the vassal states surrounding Israel took the opportunity to assert their independence. After Solomon died, his son and heir, Rehoboam, went to the Ephraimite city of Shechem to be crowned king. Jeroboam, speaking as representative of the northern tribes, offered to accept Rehoboam as their king if he lightened the work the people were required to do. Rehoboam's older advisors who had served Solomon counseled him to be willing to serve them and fulfill their request. But Rehoboam rejected their counsel. Instead, he followed the advice of the younger counselors, who told him to take a hard line and threatened to increase the workload on the people if they didn't support him. In response to Rehoboam's uncompromising approach, the northern tribes rebelled, seceded from David and Solomon's unified nation, and formed their own kingdom. This northern kingdom was called Israel. It was also known as Ephraim because Jeroboam's capital, Shechem, was on Mount Ephraim. The term Ephraim appears over 80 times in the Old Testament's historical and prophetic books as a reference to the northern kingdom of Israel. The southern kingdom was called Judah because Judah was the dominant tribe in the south. Benjamin was also part of the southern kingdom. The people in both the northern and southern kingdoms immediately fell into idolatry and wickedness. For the next 200 years, they were continually at odds with one another, and they even formed alliances with the surrounding nations to try to gain strategic advantage over one another. We now come to Elijah the prophet. Elijah is another example of a wilderness prophet, an outsider who comes out of nowhere with a message of repentance. We know nothing of Elijah's origins other than he was called the Tishbite, indicating that he was from the city of Tishbe in Gilead, east of the Jordan River. Elijah's name, Eliyahu, means Jehovah is my God, which is appropriate since he was one of Israel's staunchest supporters of the exclusive worship of Jehovah. Elijah appeared during the reign of King Ahab of the northern kingdom of Israel. Ahab came to power in Israel around 869 BC. He was more wicked than all the kings of Israel that came before him. Ahab married Jezebel, the daughter of a Phoenician king. This alliance was doubtless the means of procuring great riches for Ahab, some of which he used to build a palace inlaid with ivory. Although Ahab worshipped Jehovah, as the names of his children attest, Jezebel was firmly attached to the worship of Baal, the Canaanite storm and fertility god. Under her influence, Ahab built a temple in honor of Baal in Samaria, as well as ritual poles to Baal's consort, Ashtaroth. Jezebel imported many prophets of Baal from Phoenicia and supported them out of state funds. Elijah the prophet appeared suddenly in Ahab's court to announce, in the name of Jehovah, that the heavens would be sealed. There would be a paralyzing drought that would not be lifted until Elijah gave the command. This drought lasted over 2 years. It was severe and widespread. Of all the miracles Elijah could have performed, why a drought? This was a potent challenge to Baal in his area of expertise, rain and agriculture. This specific miracle showed that the power attributed to Baal was, in reality, controlled by Jehovah, the God of Israel. From modern revelation, we learn that the sealing power Elijah held extends to the ability to seal family relationships beyond death. In fulfillment of the prophecy of Malachi, Elijah personally restored the keys of the sealing power of the priesthood to Joseph Smith in 1836. After hiding from Ahab's men and being fed miraculously by ravens, the Lord told Elijah to go to Zarephath in Sidon, where the Lord had prepared an unnamed widow to receive him. Zarephath was a port city in the region of Sidon. What was significant about Sidon? It was a city of Phoenicia, the nation on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, north of Israel. Baal was the chief god of the Phoenicians. Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, was Jezebel's father. In other words, this was Baal's backyard and the home of Jezebel, Baal's chief supporter in Israel. By sending Elijah there, Jehovah was directly challenging the cult of Baal. The regional famine was so bad that the widow of Zarephath had only a handful of flour and a little olive oil. She intended to make a final meal for herself and her son before they both died of starvation. Elijah instructed her to make a little cake of bread for him, then 2 more for herself and her son, with the promise from Jehovah, the God of Israel, that her jar of flour and jug of oil would not run out until the famine had ended. She did what he directed, and his promised miracle came to pass. Elijah performed many miracles. Why did the author record this story, and what was his point in doing so? Elijah conclusively demonstrated that it was Jehovah, not Baal, who had the power to assuage hunger. Elijah also performed this miracle on Baal's home turf, showing that Jehovah had power everywhere in the earth and among all people, not just within the borders of Israel and among its people. The Lord directed Elijah not to go to the king of Sidon, but to a widowed woman, a person at the absolute bottom of the social strata of ancient society. This account was a criticism of the wealthy hierarchy of the Baal cult and a strong message that Israel's God cared about and defended the weak and those who had no social standing. The story is also about the great faith of the widow of Zarephath in her dealings with a prophet from a foreign land and a foreign God. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland taught, quote, "Then this understated expression of faith, as great under these circumstances as any I know in the scriptures. The record says simply, and she went and did according to the sayings of Elijah." Perhaps uncertain what the cost of her faith would be, not only to herself, but to her son as well, she first took her small loaf to Elijah, obviously trusting that if there were not enough bread left over, at least she and her son would have died in an act of pure charity. I know that a talk in General Conference is not going to cut through the centuries of temporal inequity that have plagued humankind, but I also know that the gospel of Jesus Christ holds the answer to every social and political and economic problem this world has ever faced. And I know we can each do something, however small that act may seem to be. We can pay an honest tithe and give our fast and free will offerings according to our circumstances. And we can watch for other ways to help. To worthy causes and needy people, we can give time if we don't have money, and we can give love when our time runs out. We can share the loaves we have and trust God that the cruse of oil will not fail. Unquote. While Elijah was staying with the woman of Zarephath, her son died of a sudden illness. At first, she accused Elijah of coming to her only to confront her with her sins and kill her son. But Elijah performed another miracle by raising the young man from the dead. In Canaanite mythology, a drought would signal that Baal had been defeated by Mot, the god of death, and that Baal was imprisoned in the underworld. While Baal was supposedly overcome by death and unable to function like a king, Jehovah demonstrated his sovereignty and superiority by restoring life to the widow's son. This demonstrated that Jehovah was more powerful than both Baal and Mot. By the third year, drought and famine had devastated the region so badly that even King Ahab was forced to scour the land for water and grass to keep his animals alive. The Lord commanded Elijah to confront Ahab again. Ahab accused Elijah of being the source of the troubles in Israel, but Elijah replied that the true cause was Ahab himself, because he had forsaken Jehovah's commandments and followed the worship of Baal. Ahab agreed to a trial of strength between Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal, representing Jehovah and Baal respectively. The contest took place at Mount Carmel, near the sea on the border between Israel and Phoenicia. There, Elijah accused the people of Israel of trying to have it both ways, as it were, by worshiping Jehovah and Baal simultaneously. 1 Kings 18, verse 21, English Standard Version, quote, "And Elijah came near to all the people and said, 'How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him.' And the people did not answer him a word." Unquote. The Hebrew word translated halt in the King James Version means to limp or to hop, as someone with an injury or disfigurement does. Elder Neal A. Maxwell imparted this wisdom, quote, "The stirring words of various prophets make even more sense as they urge us to choose, to decide. It is too easy for us, if we're not careful, to rationalize Elijah's pleading as coming from an impatient prophet whose own ego, in a sense, was on the line, when in fact Elijah's message has tremendous relevancy today, for all must finally choose between the gods of this world and the God of eternity." Unquote. From morning until evening, the prophets of Baal attempted to call down fire to consume their sacrifice. Elijah sarcastically taunted them, in response to which they cut themselves, as the Canaanite god Anat would, in an attempt to free Baal from his captivity. But, as the English Standard Version of 1 Kings 18, verse 29 translates it, there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. When Elijah's turn came, he prepared an altar from 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel, dug a trench around it, laid wood upon it, and flayed a bull and laid its pieces on the wood. He then commanded the people to drench the altar with jars of water 3 times. Remember, water was Baal's specialty. 1 Kings 18, verses 36 to 38, King James Version, quote, "And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench." Unquote. Fire, the divine symbol of the divine presence of Jehovah, fell from the sky, consuming the offering, the wood, the stones, the dirt, and the water in the trench. The people of Israel fell on their faces out of fear and respect and cried aloud, "Jehovah, he is the God. Jehovah, he is the God." Elijah ordered the people to seize all the prophets of Baal, and he executed them in the Kishon Valley. After this, a gathering cloud appeared on the western horizon, and a heavy rainstorm ensued, ending the famine. Jezebel was furious about Elijah's victory over her prophets, so she sought to kill him. Elijah fled south and, with the assistance of an angel, came to Mount Horeb. Horeb was another name for Sinai, the mountain on which Moses encountered the burning bush and where he later spoke with God face to face and received the Ten Commandments. This text established Elijah as a type of Moses. The place was the same. Elijah fasted for 40 days. The Lord visited him personally, and the visitation was accompanied by earthquake, wind, and fire. When the Lord came to Elijah and asked him why he was there, Elijah complained bitterly that he had been zealous for Jehovah, but, quote, "The children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." Unquote. That was 1 Kings 19, verse 10. Elijah implied in his complaint that he had been zealous for the Lord's name, but the Lord had not been zealous for Elijah's name. The Lord commanded Elijah to stand upon the mountain. The Lord then passed by, and his presence was accompanied by a great wind, then by an earthquake, and then fire. But the scripture explains that the Lord was not in these things. This was yet another challenge to the Baal deity. Baal was the wind and the rain, but Jehovah is not the earthquake or the fire. He controls those things. They are manifestations of his presence, but they aren't themselves his presence. That manifestation came next, with the sounding of a still, small voice. In 1996, reporter Mike Wallace of the CBS program 60 Minutes interviewed President Gordon B. Hinckley and asked him, quote, "The Mormons, Mr. President, call you a living Moses, a prophet who literally communicates with Jesus. How do you do that?" Unquote. At the next General Conference, President Hinckley shared the response he gave. Quote, "Let me say first that there is a tremendous history behind this church, a history of prophecy, a history of revelation, and decisions which set the pattern of the church so that there are not constant recurring problems that require any special dispensation. But there are occasionally things that arise where the will of the Lord is needed and is sought. And in those circumstances, I think the best way I could describe the process is to liken it to the experience of Elijah as set forth in the book of 1 Kings. Elijah spoke to the Lord, and there was a wind, a great wind, and the Lord was not in the wind. And there was an earthquake, and the Lord was not in the earthquake. And there was a fire, and the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, which I describe as the whisperings of the Spirit. Now, let me just say categorically that the things of God are understood by the Spirit of God, and one must have and seek and cultivate that Spirit. And there comes understanding, and it is real. I can give testimony of that." Unquote. At the end of his ministry, Elijah was translated, taken up into heaven without experiencing death. As Elijah was carried up to heaven in a chariot of fire, his cloak, or mantle, fell to the ground. His disciple Elisha picked up the cloak and with it struck the Jordan River, parting it miraculously. This is the origin of the Latter-day Saint term, the mantle of the prophet. It's a symbolic reference to the authority of a deceased prophet that passes to his successor. Elisha became Elijah's successor as the great prophet in Israel. His name, Elisha, means "my God saves." Like Elijah, Elisha was also a prophet of the northern kingdom. Elijah could have chosen a professional prophet who belonged to the prophetic guild as his assistant and apprentice. Instead, the Lord told him to find and anoint Elisha, a farmer. After Elijah was translated, Elisha rose to the full stature of his master by performing miracles like multiplying a widow's oil and raising a child from the dead. Most of the stories of Elisha's miracles are short and were intended to display his great power. Many of his miracles centered around relieving poverty or hunger. He healed a spring, nullified the poison in a stew so that his disciples could eat during a famine, multiplied 20 loaves of bread to feed 100 people, and floated the head of a borrowed axe that had fallen into a river. The lengthiest miracle story involving Elisha concerns his healing of the Syrian commander Naaman of leprosy. Elisha even called out 2 female bears to kill 42 young boys who were making fun of his baldness. This story sounds shocking, and admittedly it is pretty horrific, but it was intended to establish Elisha's power and authority and to demonstrate that you don't speak evil of the Lord's anointed prophet. Elisha was also involved in political affairs. He intervened in the war between Israel and Syria. It was during this conflict that Elisha opened his servant's eyes so he could see that the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire, demonstrating that Israel was protected by the Lord's army. Elisha's ministry lasted for more than 40 years and spanned the reigns of 3 kings of Israel. He was such a powerful prophet that a dead man, when he came into contact with Elisha's bones, came back to life and stood up. The next major event in Israel's history was the overthrow of the northern kingdom of Israel by Assyria, circa 721 BC. As I discussed earlier, Assyria was the dominant regional power during this period. The kingdoms within Assyria's territory, including Israel and Judah, were vassal states that paid tribute to Assyria and, in exchange, were permitted a limited amount of self-rule. The Assyrians were continually at war to expand their empire or to put down uprisings by vassal states within Assyrian territory. Hoshea, the last king of the northern kingdom of Israel, came to power around 732 BC. He was forced to submit to Assyria and render tribute. Hoshea eventually withheld the tribute he had promised to Assyrian king Shalmaneser. At this time, Egypt was also trying to break from Assyrian rule, and Hoshea expected that the Egyptians would agree to a military alliance with Israel. The hoped-for Egyptian support never materialized, though. the Assyrian army descended on Israel, conquered her, and deported her people beyond the Euphrates River. In their place, the Assyrians transplanted people from Babylon and other Assyrian cities to the east. The downfall of Israel and the deportation of her people had three major effects from a scriptural standpoint. The first effect: because the northern kingdom had been composed of 10 Israelite tribes, these deported people became known as the Lost 10 Tribes. There has been much bizarre and unwarranted speculation about the location of these lost tribes. 2 Kings states that they remain in Assyria unto this day, but that was written by record keepers from Judah, probably in the late 6th century BC. Some people assert that these tribes are still dwelling together as a distinct people. They interpret a handful of scripture passages literally to claim that the lost tribes of Israel are all in a single place and will return as one large group at a given time in the future. Some enthusiasts have even asserted that the earth is hollow, that the 10 tribes are living inside the hollow earth, and that they will emerge from a giant, as yet undiscovered hole that is somewhere near the North Pole. The scriptures don't claim that the 10 tribes are all in a single place. In fact, Nephi explained that they are scattered to and fro upon the isles of the sea, and Jesus referred to them as the dispersed of my people. Elder Bruce R. McConkie wrote, quote, "There is something mysterious and fascinating about believing the 10 tribes are behind an iceberg somewhere in the land of the north, or that they are on some distant planet that will one day join itself with the earth, or that the tribe of Dan is in Denmark, the tribe of Reuben is in Russia, and so forth. A common cliche asserts, if we knew where the lost tribes were, they would not be lost. True it is that they are lost from the knowledge of the world. They are not seen and recognized as the kingdom they once were. But in general terms, their whereabouts is known. They are scattered in all the nations of the earth, primarily in the nations north of the lands of their first inheritance." Unquote. The second effect: the Assyrians transplanted foreigners from Babylon and other places in eastern Assyria and resettled them in the lands that were previously the northern kingdom of Israel. This area became known as Samaria. Its people were the Samaritans. The Assyrian rulers instructed the Samaritans to worship Jehovah as the local god, but they also retained their worship of other gods, something the people of Judah detested. 200 years later, circa 539 BC, after the Jews returned from Babylon, a deep animosity developed between Jews and Samaritans. This enmity endured for the next 600 years, up through the time of Jesus. The third effect: the downfall of the kingdom of Israel left the kingdom of Judah as a vassal state to Assyria and in conflict with the other vassal kingdoms that surrounded her. This situation eventually led to Judah herself being overthrown and her people also being deported 136 years later. We're going to skip forward 100 years to circa 623 BC and the reign of King Josiah of Judah. 2 Kings describes Josiah in positive terms. He was a king who, quote, "did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left," unquote. That was 2 Kings 22, verse 2. According to 2 Kings, Josiah decided to renovate the temple at Jerusalem, so he sent Hilkiah, the high priest, into the temple treasury to gather up silver to pay the workers. While Hilkiah was in the treasury, he discovered a scroll with the law on it. This is traditionally believed to have been the book of Deuteronomy. Hilkiah read the scroll to King Josiah. When Josiah realized how far the people of Judah had gone astray, he asked Hilkiah for a revelation from the Lord. Hilkiah went to Huldah, the prophetess, who revealed that the Lord was angry with the people for worshiping idols, and he was going to destroy Judah if the people didn't repent. Josiah ordered all idols removed from the temple in Jerusalem, and he put a stop to all sacrifices that were being carried out anywhere but at that temple. He also put the people under covenant to live the law. Josiah is considered one of the great heroes of the Old Testament because he put things right that had gone wrong for so many generations. But consider the possibility. What if Josiah was wrong? It's generally accepted that history is written by the victors. What if the account we read in 2 Kings 22 and 23 is a sympathetic account of Josiah's reign written by people who agreed with him? 2 Kings was, after all, written by Deuteronomists who would have agreed with the reforms Josiah enacted. What if, instead, Josiah actually put down an older form of worship that was closer to the one practiced by Abraham, one that included worship of the Son of the Most High God, a Melchizedek priesthood, and a recognition of a heavenly queen who was God's wife? And what if some Israelites outside of the temple priests held on to these suppressed beliefs? People like the Book of Mormon prophet Lehi. And what if those lost beliefs were finally restored hundreds of years later as part of Christianity? Those are the arguments made by Dr. Margaret Barker, a Methodist scholar from England whose academic career goes back to the 1980s. While not all scholars accept her theories, there has been wide interest in her work, particularly among Latter-day Saints. Barker herself has been particularly impressed by the Book of Mormon's account of Lehi and his vision of the Tree of Life. She has spoken at Brigham Young University, been published by BYU Press, was a presenter at the 2005 Worlds of Joseph Smith conference at the Library of Congress, and has visited Utah several times. Barker argues that Lehi's vision of the Tree of Life is an authentic representation of Jewish beliefs before the time of Josiah's reforms and the Babylonian captivity, and that Joseph Smith's restoration of Christ in the Old Testament is exactly what we should expect from these old traditions. I'm not saying that Margaret Barker is right, and that Josiah put down an authentic and proper form of worship. She has, however, done some fascinating research, and there has been enthusiastic response to her work from some Latter-day Saint scholars, as well as expressions of caution and criticism. I'll conclude this lesson by discussing the overthrow of Judah and the deportation of the people of Judah to Babylon in 587 BC. In 612 BC, the Neo-Babylonian Empire overthrew the Assyrians. Egypt and Babylon fought a ferocious war for dominance over the Levant. In 609 BC, King Josiah tried to block Egypt's invasion of Syria, but the army of Judah was defeated and Josiah killed at the Battle of Megiddo. The Egyptian pharaoh installed Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, as king of Judah, and turned Judah into a vassal state to Egypt. 4 years later, 605 BC, the Babylonian army, under command of Nebuchadnezzar II, defeated the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish and regained control of the western lands the Egyptians had taken. Judah became subject to the Babylonian Empire. In 601 BC, Nebuchadnezzar attempted to invade Egypt, but his army was repulsed with heavy losses. King Jehoiakim of Judah took this opportunity to revolt against Babylonian authority, believing that Egypt would support him. Jehoiakim died, and his son Jehoiakim was on the throne when Nebuchadnezzar and his army besieged Jerusalem for 3 months and took the city in early 597 BC. The Babylonians plundered the temple, deported Jehoiakim and 3,000 elite and skilled Jews to Babylon, and installed Zedekiah as the puppet ruler of Judah. Zedekiah was the last king of Judah. The prophet Jeremiah was Zedekiah's counselor, yet Zedekiah ignored Jeremiah's warnings and did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. In spite of the protests of Jeremiah and his other advisors, Zedekiah chose to enter an alliance with Egypt and rebel against Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar responded by besieging Jerusalem again. Famine was widespread in the city when the Babylonians finally broke through the city walls after an 18-month siege. Many of the city's inhabitants were deported to Babylon, and Solomon's temple was plundered and destroyed. Some Jews, including Jeremiah, escaped to Egypt. The Jews in Babylon remained captives there for 48 years. In 539 BC, the Persian Empire overthrew the Babylonians, and the Persian king Cyrus granted all displaced peoples the right to return to their homelands. The Neo-Babylonian Empire lasted only 73 years, but it played a significant role in Jewish history. Latter-day Saints are familiar with this history partly because of Nephi's account in the Book of Mormon. Nephi recorded in 1 Nephi 1 verse 4 that in, quote, the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, circa 597 BC, there came many prophets, prophesying unto the people that they must repent, or the great city Jerusalem must be destroyed, unquote. Nephi's father, Lehi, was called as one of these prophets, but the people in Judah did mock him because of the things which he testified, and sought to kill him. The account in 2 Chronicles parallels Nephi's record. 2 Chronicles 36, verses 15 and 16, New American Standard Bible. Quote, the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, until there was no remedy. Unquote. That closing phrase, until there was no remedy, is packed with foreboding. The New English translation of the Bible translates this as, there was no one who could prevent the Lord's judgment. That concludes this lesson. If you enjoyed it, please click the thumbs up button and leave a comment below. Please subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new lessons are posted to this channel, and visit www.huarc.org to download these notes, the handouts for this lesson, and this slideshow. It also concludes our study of the historical books of the Old Testament. In the next lesson, I'll discuss Hebrew wisdom and poetry literature. The reading is the books of Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. See you next time.